Good morning, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to this very first Net Zero session. My name's Oli Barrett, and it's my honor to be your MC, your host, and one of the co-collaborators behind this morning. Now, our very special guest this morning is Greg Jackson. Greg is the founder and CEO of Octopus Energy. He founded it, can you believe, in 2015. And frankly, I've been trying to get together with some friends since 2015. So I don't quite understand how so much has happened for Octopus Energy in that time. They have recently been through a very significant deal. They continue to grow apace. And I thought what we could do is really dig under the skin of that a little bit by welcoming none other than its founder, Greg Jackson. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Ollie. How are you?
I'm very well. It's nice to see you beaming through the ether. You're looking very well. Are you home-based this morning, office-based?
Yeah, I'm at home, and forgive me for the lockdown lack of haircut. And I think one quick thing is your paranoia about being Alan Partridge is matched by mine about being David Brent. So anything that's too naff, please tell me.
No, not at all. I'm very much, you've charmed me. So it's really good to see you, Greg. And there's so much that I wanted to explore. And of course, this is our earliest morning Net Zero session. I always wonder with entrepreneurs whether you're a lark or an owl, when you're most productive in the day, because you sort of never stop, it seems to me.
It's funny, actually. I think I've always been a late to bed person but I think increasingly as the business has grown, early rise has happened too. But because our new investor is in Australia, we got very, very used to having a sort of 9-hour time difference bookending the day. So it's not that it's continuous work, by the way. I think work-life blend is the answer. So there's no sense to suggest everyone should be getting up at the sparrow's fart and not going to bed till, just before the alarm's set. But there is this kind of world in which you blend your work and your life throughout the 24 hours that you're alive,
Yeah, it weaves together sometimes, doesn't it? Greg, there's so much that I want to get through. And of course, I'm asking our audience here, over 60 guests in our first Net Zero session, for their questions as well. So forgive me, we're going to move at pace because I wish we had an hour, but we've got closer to 20 minutes together. I want to take us all the way back, the seed of Octopus, the origin itself. For some, it's a eureka moment. For others, it comes gradually over time. Tell us how it first got started and why you could have done anything. Why Octopus?
Now, there's a whole pile of contributory factors. So it's definitely the latter in your characteristic there. But I think there are 2 or 3 key things. The first was when I was at university, I was, in fact, even before, I joined Greenpeace when I was 16. By the way, I don't want to be rude for someone here from Greenpeace. It was very disappointing. I thought I was going to get to climb oil rigs, put banners up, getting dinghies, and instead it was a direct debit and a newsletter. But the passion was there then for creating a world in which we inflict less damage on each other, possibly even we do good. And that's so ever since I've been in business, it was because I wanted to eventually build a business that will do the good at the biggest scale. And then actually the other was as a customer. And I moved into a house, I opened an energy bill after a couple of years and it was really high. I phoned them up and they said, oh, it's really high because it's a default tariff. You've only just moved in. We don't know who you are. I was like, okay, cool. So they put me on a better tariff. That made sense. I don't know, 15, 16 months later, I opened the bill. It was really high. And I phoned them up and they said, oh, it's a default tariff. Don't worry, I'll cut it for you now. And I said, but why was it a default tariff? You've already cut it. And he said, well, it only lasts a year. And then if you don't phone us back up, we put it back on the default. And I was like, whoa, what kind of industry kind of only, like, literally the moment you're not looking tries to charge you more?
So it sounds already in those origins, Greg, as though a very different approach to customer service, how you deal with customers. Also, an energy company that doesn't trash the planet. Just remind us, what is the secret sauce right in the middle of Octopus Energy, which gives rise to its green credentials? Just remind us what you're doing differently.
Yeah, and there are 2 things again there. So first is technology. The energy sector, one of the reasons we entered it was in all the incumbents globally, typically sit on platforms that are a couple of decades old, which means they can't react to the different energy system we've got today. Where wind and sun shine, we have very cheap electrons, green, 0 marginal cost electrons. But when the weather's not so good, then we don't. And if we can react to that in real time, we can make the most of renewable energy. Instead of seeing it as a problem, there are times when we've got this abundant electricity, but that needs technology. That technology also delivers better service and lower prices. And if we can deliver lower prices to customers, instead of thinking about green taxes, about green energy being more expensive, we can actually make sure that green energy is cheaper energy. And if we can make green energy cheaper energy, then it becomes the new mainstream. And so that passion, that mission to move away from a world of green taxes and to the green dividend is really at the core of what we're doing.
And I wonder if in that mix, there's an opportunity to change the way customers behave when they do what they do. Is that part of your remit? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, we're doing it. First of all, it's so fortunate, maybe it's not a coincidence, that the rise of electric vehicles is happening at the same time as the rise of renewable generation. And that means that you've got this, a typical electric car battery can hold, I don't know, a week's worth of energy for the average house. So when we've got these green electrons in abundance, we fill up the batteries of the cars. That means that when electrons are in shorter supply, we're using them in houses and businesses. And that enables us to balance the system as it becomes more and more renewable. So we can do that automatically. You don't need to go and plug your car in at 4 a.m. Just leave it plugged in. Technology will work out when to charge it. And we're already doing that at scale. And that's the way we're going to pave the way to, a cheaper, greener future.
And presumably doing things a bit differently has the knock-on saving effect for the customer as well. And that's all woven into how you're doing things.
It is, yeah. I mean, actually, Jeff Bezos has got this great quote, which is, "Your margin is my opportunity." That's how he talks to incumbents in the markets that they enter. And I think if you look at energy, typical energy companies in the UK, we're making around a 15% gross margin. Amazon, makes 2 to 4%. If you're doing things digitally, you should be able to drop prices, share the benefit with the customers, and use that to both grow your business and make the world greener.
Interesting. So give us a snapshot of the business today. You've got over 1.5 million customers. Have I got that about right? Give us a sense of how you're growing and crucially where you're growing.
Yeah, so we've got about 1.5 million in the UK, in fact, more than that and growing. By the way, energy companies always overquote their figures. They'll tell you how many accounts they've got, and that counts gas and electric separate. If we're doing that, we've got 2.7 million, just if you're seeing numbers quoted. So that's about 5% market share, and we roughly doubled last year, so hopefully we keep up that fast growth rate. We're also live in Germany. We acquired a business there, and we're going to be growing that massively over the next year or two, and really bringing Germany the same benefits of service and greenness we have in the UK. And we're now live in Australia as well, and we're working with 2 other companies in Australia where we're licensing our technology, and that will put several million households on our platform over the next couple of years.
Right. So I'm going to come on to Australia as part of your recent deal. But as a leader, what have been the biggest barriers as you've tried? Because you started with this fierce ambition. It sounds to me that ambition has only grown. What have been the biggest barriers in your way as you've tried to scale?
So, Oli, I didn't know you were going to ask that. And the first thing that came to mind is a very personal one, but I'll share it with you. It was actually my own fear of failure. So I wrote the business plan with some friends in 2012, 2013, and it required 10 million quid of investment. And we were too nervous to go and raise that money off a PowerPoint. So a typical startup, we wanted an MVP, and it's hard to do that in a regulated sector. So it was years before I bumped into the founder of Octopus Group randomly and realized I should pitch him on the idea.
So just so we understand that, you actually ended up bootstrapping it, self-funding it for?
No, we didn't. We did other things. We just left the business on the shelf.
Wow.
Because, the idea of going to someone with a PowerPoint and saying, we need £10 million commitment to get started, I kind of felt it was a big ask. And I really waited till I met the right person. Instead,
and I can sense now, Greg, I can sense one of our guests is saying, Greg, what were your credentials? What qualified you to start an energy company? I could have asked that, but just remind us, because when you did meet Simon from Octopus, clearly something sparked.
Look, I mean, I knew nothing about energy. In fact, when we started the business, we launched before we knew how to buy it. But what we did know about was customers and technology. And we built, me and some of my co-founders have previously built a business which built technology platforms in many sectors. And you learn, kind of generically how technology platforms can change a sector, whether it be e-commerce or banking or whatever. But I think one observation for me is Uber wasn't started by cab drivers or Addison Lee. Amazon wasn't started by Borders or Waterstones. The tech companies that change sectors are typically driven by people who understand how technology can revolutionize the sector. People in the sector tend not to have that tech expertise, not at the C-level, not the top of the company.
Yeah.
And so they make the classic mistake of they're telling the tech function in their business what to do. But if you know about tech, you can say, this is what we can do. This is how we can change. So I think that was our key credential.
Okay, and thank you for sharing that personal revelation. On that question of barriers, I'm conscious something else was coming to mind.
Well, yeah, it was more about fear of failure, though. When we wrote the business plan, we started at the bottom and kind of built it up. And our stretch target had us launching in 2016 and having 600,000 customers by 2021.
Yeah.
And by 2018, we were at 600,000 customers. And I was kind of sitting there looking at it saying, look, we were just embarrassed to write down what we really thought we could achieve, because we were scared if we put it out there, then we might fail publicly. And I was sitting in a deck chair in the Peak District outside a tent when that came to me. And I just realized that, we were sitting there thinking, but one day that might make us as big as the Big Six. And I realized our answer is, the Big Six? Why we just breeze past them like they don't exist? We're changing the world. We're changing the sector. And that mindset was so important to enable us to say, you know what, we're going to grow to 100 million customers, right, on our platform. Because we're not going to make a big green dent unless we're big. But if we're scared of making statements like that, how are we ever going to get the team, the investors and the customers to back us on that mission?
Right. So on that, Greg, and again, I'm going to shift gear a bit because I want to get some quick insights. Very briefly, congratulations, Octopus Energy is now a green unicorn. You've raised over $300 million from Australia's largest energy provider. Tell us what that deal means to you personally and what it will unlock for the company.
Yeah, look, I think it is the path by which we will take the opportunity to build cheaper, greener energy, to transition to it faster in dramatically more countries, dramatically more quickly. And we have to do that. The battle against climate change, if we think COVID is an emergency, the climate change crisis is existential. And, how long we got? Well, every day, every week, every month, every year that we're not making change, we're creating irreversible damage. So for me, raising enough money to move very, very fast is critical, both as a business to capitalize on the opportunity to change the world, and as humans, as people on a mission to deliver that change at the speed that, the maximum speed we can for the sake of our planet.
And that sounds to me, Greg, like you're looking way beyond the UK and Australia. And this is broader than that. Yeah,
and an exciting thing, actually, the UK is, in retail energy, the UK is a bit of a world leader. We've had delegations just before COVID from 15 countries came to see us to talk about how to drive the sort of move to renewables in a way that is going to be great for customers and bring costs down. And I think we can export our model around the world. It's a really exciting opportunity as we look at a green-led recovery.
Yeah. Can I ask you particularly about the coronavirus pandemic? Your biggest lessons from it as a leader, and any changes that you have made to the business, which you think, frankly, are worth keeping?
Yeah, so I think as a leader, it has taught us an enormous amount about the risks to our team, loneliness, isolation, things like that. Of course, we have to worry about, if there's an upcoming recession, customers in debt and so on. But the very, very first thing is make sure we look after ourselves so we can look after our customers. And I think our team are getting incredibly good at looking out for each other. In terms of things that we're going to keep for this, interesting, Octopus already had around 100 people that work from home. Our cloud-based technology meant we could move to it seamlessly. And I think the way that we're now treating the return to work is it's needs-led. And of course, we all know about the pain of people who've got toddlers kicking around the house while they try to do their work, and how stressful that is. But there are other groups as well that we don't think about as much, like 4 or 5 house sharers, at the beginning of their career, where they've essentially got a box room each and maybe a shared kitchen if they're lucky, and trying to do their work in that environment, perched on the end of a bed, cross-legged with a laptop. So we're really looking at this kind of new world in which the office is needs-led rather than company-led.
Yeah. Really, really interesting. I've got so many more questions, but frankly, the questions that we're already fielding from guests are far more interesting, actually. But this is such a fascinating story, Greg. Thank you. I've got a question from Helen Gillette. I hope I've pronounced that right. What's the company culture, and how have you made sure employees are valued? Oh, here we are. Are valued as customers. So the tech disruptors in other markets you mentioned have mixed reputations on this. So that's particularly around culture and how you look after employees.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And by the way, Helen, thanks for asking. I didn't talk about it at the beginning, but one of the founding reasons for building the business was because I have very strong passion for the way in which companies can be brought together. I was taught a lesson when I first ran a business after I left Procter & Gamble by Tina, age 48, who I helped on a phone call. And she put the phone down after the phone call. And she gave me a death stare. Forgive me for the language. She said, "For fuck's sake, Greg, I'm 48 years old. I bring up 2 boys and an unemployed husband on the poxy wage this company pays me. I love this company more than you do. I was here before you, and I'll be here when you're gone. There is nothing you need to tell me about how to do my job. All right?" And by the way, there were quite a lot of people in the room at the time, and there was a stony silence. And I realized how right she was, and I put my arm around her, and I changed how I managed thereafter. And trusting people, giving them the freedom and the responsibility to do their jobs is the very core of how we build the business. And what that means is, for example, there are no scripts. There's no, we don't track holidays, things like that. We trust people to do the job, and we give them the freedom to be brilliant. Because the worst thing about most companies is they go through this recruitment process. We look for smart, bright, creative, intelligent people, and then they arrive at work and you put them in a straitjacket. Yeah. And you take away all the things you've just recruited for. And so if you look at our Glassdoor, I hope we stand out very different than the other companies you're thinking of. And
the Glassdoor, the very transparent recruitment website where employees can give feedback, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And what are you proud about what it says?
2 things, actually. I think our employees, our recruitment process can be improved. But the people who work for us absolutely experience what I've just described in terms of that freedom, responsibility, freedom to be themselves. We say to our team, you don't hang your personality up when you come to work, right? You are yourself the whole time because we want you, and that means you are a fulfilled human being. And I think that's so important. Yeah.
Sorry, carry on, please.
No, that's it.
So, Greg, I'm going to pace through some more questions, but I'm going to usher us towards, I'm not going to say tweet-size answers, but I'm conscious each of these, because I've scanned them, merits a 10-minute answer, and we've got 6. Michael Barlow asks, as a lawyer, I'm always interested to know whether there's one change to the regulation of an industry which would make a huge change. What an interesting question. That's throwing you on the spot, but it's something you would have thought about.
Yeah, it is. There are 2 things very quickly. First one is, if you've got sensible regulation on transparency of pricing and service, you can get rid of almost everything else, because so much of the rest of it is an attempt to deliver that. And so we end up with cat and mouse on hundreds of pages of regulation when we could have some really simple stuff, the equivalent of Weights and Measures Act in retail. The second one, really quickly, is regulation should be a balanced scorecard. What does your company do that's good and makes things better? What do you do that isn't good? Rather than being just trying to catch you out when you get things wrong. Because you get no prizes for doing good stuff in regulation.
Right. On that, I think you'll like this next question. This is from award-winning food sharing business, Olio, Tessa Clark. Good morning, Tessa. Asks, there's been increasing, her quote, talk about the climate crisis in the past 2 years in the business world. How would you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 the action that has been taken to date by these companies?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was actually trying to find the question. When you say these companies, which ones are you talking about?
Well, that is a good question. So I'd have to be channeling Tessa because I'm reading verbatim. But I think she's saying that some companies talk a good talk on climate change, and to the extent that you're seeing that translated into action. And that's the gist of it.
So forgive me for 2 cynicisms, right? Maybe 3. The first one is I think companies quite frequently retrofit purpose, CSR to whatever they really want to do. And I don't think companies are as, committed to changes is often the case. And if we look at some of the oil companies that tell us how much money they've kind of invested in renewable and change, and then we looked at how much they actually put into exploration and production of petroleum and oil, it's shocking to see that actually the majority of the investments are still going to the wrong places. So I think there's an incredible amount of work to be done to question companies about this. I think we are fortunate as a family.
Who should be questioning them?
I mean, look, I think it's a shame that the media are great. They don't have the resources to do this. I hope that companies like Tortoise, Slow Media, that can really dig into topics, will be able to help us. And also people who work in them. Like if you work in a company, you have the opportunity to both shine a light on it and challenge and drive change. And I've been watching the Dirty Money series on Netflix. It's shocking how corporate cultures can cause bad behaviors, but those corporate cultures come from people. And we live in a world now where social media, Glassdoor, everything give people the chance to say, hey, look, I love this company, but there's some stuff we need to do different. And I really urge people to do that.
So on that, Greg, talking to you, I get, and forgive me because I've urged you into it in my sort of enthusiastic way, because you communicate and operate at pace. So to Mangala Mark Zuckerberg quote, how do you move fast and not break things?
I mean, first of all, we do break things, right? But you break things that can be broken. So I think you have to look at every decision and say, look, if this goes wrong, what's the consequence? Is it going to threaten the company? Can't do that. Is it going to cause, danger to life? Can't do that. But if it's going to lose us a few million quid on an idea that might not work out, and we've got access to the funding to cover it, and it could change the world if it goes right, we do it.
Right. Very interesting. Tom Robbins asks a question, very, very, very succinct question about smart meters. Smart meters, smart infrastructure have received a lot of criticism. What impact do you think they can have to Octopus and your customers? And I'm going to ask you for a pithy answer in the interest of time.
Yeah. So look, if we're going to capitalize on green electrons when they're available, we need a smart grid. And really what we need to do is say, look, a green electron that travels a short distance down an empty wire should be a cheap electron. A brown electron going a long distance down a congested wire should be expensive. Now, if we move to that, we'll find that consumers start consuming green electrons. We need smart meters to make that possible. The smart meter rollout, look, you're putting some new hardware with new software with 2 versions into 20-odd million households in a very short period of time. Of course, there are teething problems, just like when Wi-Fi started happening. Even today, broadband, we all see on Zoom calls, it's not perfect. So smart meters, few teething issues, they'll get there, but they are key to unlocking a green future.
Right. Very interesting. Thank you, Greg. In that earlier question on the 1 to 10 scale, I suppose it got our minds thinking about which companies are doing it well, which companies inspire you. And that's what Suzanne Given asks, which corporates do it well? And the hint there is corporate. So maybe she's thinking towards the larger end, but you take your pick.
Yeah, you know what? I genuinely don't know. And I think maybe it's a weakness of us, but it's almost like we play our own game. Like we look really hard at what we do. And so I'm not that familiar, but I can say there's really interesting bits of innovation that I see that are great for the planet. So, for example, Google increasingly, what they're doing with their data centers is making them use the maximum computing power at the times when there's maximum renewables available. Right now, that don't worry, I don't know about what the rest of what Google does, but that is really, really, really important to reduce the climate impact of the computing cycles. But as a species, we want those computing cycles. If we can do them in a way that doesn't cause damage, that's great.
So on that, Greg, you make me wonder, how do you as a leader tread the line between not sticking to the knitting, it's very interesting knitting, and scanning the horizon, scanning the radar, seeing what others are doing, because you need to be focused and aware. Yeah.
So, I mean, I must say, I don't look as much at what companies are doing. What I do look at is what you might call physics. And I don't mean in the deep sense, I'm not looking at quantum physics, but really looking at a big question for me, for example, is what would the world be like if we'd never had fossil fuels? We wouldn't see renewables as an issue because they would be what we've got, and we'd have built for that. So how do you build that now? How do we build it as though we'd never had fossil fuels? And I think that kind of thinking, what you're doing is you're really green, you're thinking on a clean sheet of paper about a different world and then plotting your path towards it. And I spent a lot of time asking the team questions like, if it was all wind, don't tell me that we need some gas. Just tell me if gas didn't exist, then what would we do? And I think that's the kind of question we ask ourselves to build a better future.
Yeah, well, some guests will think that some of their team meetings are already all wind, but that is a slightly different point. Greg, on the point you've just made, remind us, this Future Energy Research Centre, it's something you're helping create. What is it? Because it sounds unusually academic, if you'll forgive me, but it does sound intriguing.
Yeah, it is. A lot of the way that energy systems in the UK and around the world, there's a lot of central planning. And that planning is often informed by the world we've come from. And this is us taking responsibility and saying, hey, look, we've got a view about how the world could be. So we'll employ the data scientists, the engineers, economists, policy experts, communications experts to really say, for example, if the world was 100% renewable, how would the system really work? What would the economics be? What are the economics of investing in that world? Yeah. Once we've modeled that world and we can share that back with governments and back with grids around the world, what we can then do is start to say, look, I don't have to just wave my arms and talk about it as a theoretical possibility. We'll have done incredibly detailed modeling of the interplay between the way in which consumption works, industry works, and 100% renewable system works.
So this is the Future Energy Research Centre, and inviting collaborators on that?
Yeah, we are. We're talking to academics at the moment. We had over 100 job applications before we even told people what jobs were going to be in it or what the salaries would be, because it's so exciting. And I think when people look at climate change now, that's the extent to which there is such passion from talented people. If we grasp that, I think we've got the opportunity for a green-led recovery.
Excellent. So on that, couple more very quick questions, and then we'll wrap this section just at 5 past. It's lovely, isn't it? Because we've got sort of 65 guests. Of course, we can't see their faces. We're grateful for their questions. And so I'm sort of longing for, oh, by the way, I should have said we are #NetZeroSessions, #NetZeroSessions. And the reason I'd love anyone to share that is who knows who we might draw into our next conversation that suddenly gets sparked to do things a bit differently as a result. So please do share. Greg, Rich Brassett, forgive me, asks, what other things are you doing with the business to be more sustainable? So very much looking at your own house.
Yeah, so for example, all the office locations we've ever chosen, we've been really clear that what we wanted was city centres where people can live nearby, or however they get to work, it'll be by bike, by public transport, or by foot, live a sustainable life. And for example, that thinking really is about saying, we don't want like every other energy company to have these kind of big out of town call centers that everyone drives to. And I think, interestingly, that is not only sustainable, but it's also good for our people who can socialize and mix and blend their work and the life the way I described. So I think really thinking hard at everything we do about the life we want, we want to be able to enable for people, and then making sure we do stuff that's consistent with and helps drive that.
And at the moment, that UK footprint, you have an office in London, and I think, was it Manchester, Leeds?
We're in Soho, we're in the centre of Leicester, and we're in the centre of Brighton. And through an acquisition, we're also in Warwick.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Just a final super quick question, but it is a huge question from Christoph Warwick. Huge unfair question for this time of the morning. Does Greg have an idea of how big the opportunity of clean recovery is for the UK in jobs? And there he also asked GDP, productivity, regional equality, or in any way you choose to answer that question. Just give us your view.
Yeah, look, I mean, we are quantifying that right now in terms of recovery. But to give an idea about how big the energy opportunity is, and the UK can be at the heart of this, currently retail energy globally is about $2 trillion. With the electrification of vehicles, electrification of heat, it'll double to at least $4 trillion over the next 10 or 15 years. So the world has got a $2 trillion to $4 to $6 trillion transformation. The entirety of that transformation is going to be creating jobs in generation, in technology, in a whole load of energy-related aspects. And the more of that we can build here in the UK by capitalising on the fact, not just us, you've got other companies that are really creating change in energy starting in the UK. Fantastic.
Well, Greg, we wish you well on that journey. Thank you for being our very first guest for the Net Zero Sessions. You've got us off to a really high bar. My final question is, will you stay and join us in one of our roundtable sessions? That would it would be great. And I know, I mean, you've already cast your eye over the guest list, and I know that you and I were very inspired to see some of the organisations in that mix. So thank you. And I know that if we were all here in person, the audience would be thanking you with a round of applause as well. But Greg Jackson, thank you so much. Really good to see you.
Thank you, Ollie. Thanks for the question. I'm so sorry we answered so few.
Yeah, well, we had to pick the cherries out of it, but yeah, thank you to anyone who asked as well. Huge amounts of food for thought. See you very soon, Greg. Thank you.